the American labor force is shrinking, and one of the main reasons may surprise you. The use of opioids is partly to blame for many so-called prime-age workers, mostly men, being unable or unwilling to find work. Now, that's a new report, according to Goldman Sachs. A Federal Reserve survey this year found employers were having trouble filling low-skilled positions, and one reason the applicants weren't qualified. The other reason, they could not pass a drug test. And on that topic, an offshoot of that, nearly 100 people die of an opioid overdose every single day in the U.S., and it seems no state, no community is immune from the epidemic, including Brattleboro. That's a small, picturesque community in Vermont. Quaint, historic town, population about 12,000. But in just 2 days this week, a dozen people overdosed. It's also worth noting, Brattleboro, home to a longstanding psychiatric and addiction center called Brattleboro Retreat. Josephson, CEO of the facility, joins me now. Again, Brattleboro Retreat, treating so many. But first, before we get into treatments and what can be done here, give me your reaction to those staggering numbers right there in your community.
Well, it's a shock and it's not a shock. Last year in 2016 in Vermont, we lost 112 people died from opioid overdoses in the state. So we know we have a real problem, and the CDC knows that small communities, small towns, towns that are actually more white than diverse are at statistically higher numbers for opioid problems.
What do you think's driving the spike in Brattleboro?
Well, a number of things. I think what you've seen in all communities is that the potency of the drugs that are on the street are higher. We're seeing a much higher use of fentanyl, which is a synthetic opioid, as opposed to traditional heroin. And that's just a much more powerful drug that really affects people. And people don't know what they're buying on the street. It's very hard to know what is in the packets that they pick up. And before you know it, you can have these kind of mass overdoses happen in any community.
Wow. What do you see in the midst of this? The people that need help that you treat at your facility. Is there a common thread that maybe we're missing?
Well, it's a great question. You know, what the data shows nationwide and here in Vermont, this is not a problem that discriminates according to class or gender or race so much. It really is something that can affect everyone. And the CDC here in this country has made the issue of overprescribing of opioids in the medical system as one of the origins for this problem as a country. And so a shocking statistic I just read was that if you took all the prescriptions for opioids in this country that are prescribed, that would be enough to medicate every person in this country around the clock for 3 months. So if you think about that, if you think about the amount of opioids that are being prescribed, it's a powerful drug that's sometimes overprescribed, and people can become addicted and habit-forming to these drugs. So we've got to stop things at the source, and we have done a good job, a better job as a medical community reducing the number of opioids prescribed to people, but the amount we're prescribing today is still 3 times the amount we prescribed in 1999. So we've got to do a better job as a medical community preventing people from getting access and getting addicted to these drugs.
You're a frontline guy, Louis. Before we let you go, are you hopeful as we as a country take on this crisis, or do you come at it like, man, I don't even know where we need to start here?
No, I know where we need to start, and we need to start with enough funding to get treatment for people. So I know it's a big issue in the Trump budget, it's been in the New York Times this week that the $45 billion that are in the budget for opioids is not enough, and I would agree. If we're going to be stripping Medicaid and other benefits away from people, throwing $45 billion will not fill up the gap that will come from reductions in Medicaid services and treatment services. So I know we need more resources. I know, and I've seen that people recover and do well with good addiction treatment services. Maybe not the first time, but the second time they're going to get better. And that's our hope. Our hope is for this country, if we can get people better services and evidence-based practice and treatments, they can recover. I've seen it happen over and over again, but it won't happen on the cheap, and it won't happen without the right resources.
Well, Louis, thank you for the work you do, your hopeful attitude. Keep fighting the good fight. Appreciate your time.
Thanks
again.